So, are you in the right place? If you struggle with eating when you're not hungry in most any shape or form. So there's a lot of words, and we tend to think our eating, well, I have a nighttime eating problem, or I have a binging problem, or I can't wait to be alone and eating problem, or a social situation. Or I get a lot of people is I eat really healthy, just too much of it. So whatever that is, that knowing but not doing gap, it's the same root cause. And I'm going to show you what that is later on today. If you suspect something deeper is going on, but you can't quite put your finger on it. So I have it at the bottom here, but about half of you who are here today or have signed up took the My Food Stage Finder. And the majority of you are at stage 2, which tells me you're in the right place. That's when you're ready to, it doesn't mean you stop reading or listening to podcasts, but you're like, okay, there's something deeper that just isn't an intellectual problem. And we'll talk about what we're going to reveal what that is today in a researched, evidence, client proven way. And you're willing to be curious that perhaps you're defeating, numbing, exhausting, whatever frustrating type of eating that you don't want to be doing actually makes sense. I know as someone who likes to pursue goals, even with problems that seem insurmountable, it takes courage to be open and think maybe things could actually change. And that takes a lot of courage. So I just like honor everyone who is willing to be curious and show up. And maybe you listen to my Truce with Food podcast. And other podcasts, and you read all the books, yet someone shared this with me in an email, and I thought it was such a great phrase, feel frozen to fix anything. And we'll get a little into what that might be, just beyond even just the psychology of change that we're going to talk about today. And again, if a lot of you have taken the Stage Food Finder, and stage 2 is right at this place where we're really open to it not being about more information. So the big disclaimer here is I work with a lot of clients who have past eating disorders. If you listened to last week's podcast with Jenny, she talked about being in binge eating, disorder treatment. But when she came to me, that had been, in her past. And I'm going to show you some other clients today who they had that in the past, but this work isn't applicable if you have an active eating disorder. You need to stabilize some other things. And so much of change is doing the right thing at the right time. And so if you are in an active eating disorder, this is probably not the best place for you to start. So to get the most out of today, we want you to eliminate or reduce distractions. Close your tabs, put your phone on silent if you can. A lot of resolving this eating is having the space to reflect and really hear ourselves and what's coming through instinctively and intuitively, and including what others are saying. That's why I love group work. People will often say something and it's like, oh, as one consistency client said, my feelings are intense and elusive at the same time, and having the group gives me language for putting form behind that intense but elusive feelings. So I want you to have as much as possible of that today. I also know that we don't know each other all that well, so there's a lot deeper sharing in the program, but some people may share things that just hit you in a way that you didn't know you needed to have that clarity. And then again, this is a free sneak peek of my Truce with Food consistency program. I will give that to you more at the end, and whether you decide to enroll or not, you're going to get a ton of value out of today. So we've had a lot of new people here. So just a quick background on me. I've been working now with clients. It'll be 19 years. I left my corporate job 19 years ago in October. But I obviously started doing this on the side before I left my corporate job. But I've been doing this for 19 plus years with a research-based process that I developed at the University of Pennsylvania. A lot of what's out there, especially on social media and with influencers around change, isn't research-based. Now, I'm someone who likes people who know the rules and how to break them, because I think there's a lot of gaps, especially around food and behavior change. But we're working with the research-based process that I've refined over 19 years with real clients. And then I have a ton of nutrition background as well. And I've been working with with wise women and a few men who have tried a lot of things, right? Diets. A lot of my clients are sober, which is amazing because they've done a lot of the emotional work that can then help them go to that next level. Therapy, functional medicine, and intuitive eating. A lot of my clients have struggled with intuitive eating. So if you've tried that and struggled, you're also in the right place. And then, of course, I had my own personal experience of essentially, starting Weight Watchers 11 and then battling food for about 18 years. And I've had my own truce with food for the past 20 years. So been in a ton of media, have spoken at a bunch of different places, and then that's my background in education, that education I have as well. So you get a lot of experience with me. So I want to show you that these are some of the clients that join consistency, but if you are in any of these places, this is going to help you. So Lourdes was someone who like exceeded her own expectations, and she never really even thought that she could break free from emotional eating. And I share that because this is not a process that you have to have all this belief in. Our feelings around past failures and the very triggers that make us want to eat, which I'm going to go to review in a couple minutes, create this sense of like, of high skepticism, which is, I encourage healthy skepticism. But I just want to show you that you don't even need to really believe this will work. You just have to be willing to take the next right step and be open and curious, which is if you're here, you are. And then with Reese, she was coming to me in just like a general transition in life. A lot of clients are in a transition when they come to this work, or maybe they can look back and say, oh, that was on the horizon. I didn't even know it yet. But this work is going to help you because it's about the food and not about the food. If you're looking just like in a transition and you don't want to repeat the same stressful choices that drive you to eat. And then Lori is someone who had an autoimmune issue. So I have a lot of people who do have some chronic health problems, and they know that food, certain food choices aggravate their conditions. And so there's an increased pressure when you have that. It exacerbates my anxiety or my arthritis. And this process is so gentle that it will help people who have that sort of pressure to hold as well. I just for 1 second wanted to remember that I hit the recording button. Okay, yeah, that's my brain these days. Welcome to everyone else who just joined. I always need to make sure. Okay, so if you can just share in the chat. Oh, the other thing I wanted to remind everyone is that I am recording this for those who can't attend live. So if you want to keep your camera off or just use your first name, feel free to do that. And if you want to come off camera at the end to ask questions, I can stop the recording. But this will go out to people who signed up for the recording. So share in the chat. Which one of these applies to you? I feel like I've tried everything by this point, including therapy. I'm exhausted from food being the project in my life. I know something deeper is going on, but I can't quite put my finger on it. Or does it just feel like I know a lot, but I don't implement enough and have that knowing and doing gap? So if you could just share in the chat, I would just like to take the temperature of who's here. And then I'll have to stop my share again so I can see what the chat says. Or maybe not. Maybe, oh, I can see it. Oh, yay. Oh my God. I feel like hashtag okay boomer, even though I'm not a boomer. The text always changes. All right, I know, but don't implement enough. Yeah, I know something is deeper is going on. A lot of knowing and doing. Great. Yeah, exhaustion. Yes. Oh, that's what happened to me. It's the only reason I was open to anything else. I was just like, I am just exhausted and can't keep anything else up. Okay, and Joanne, yeah, 4. Okay, great. Okay, it's super helpful to know. So what we're going to cover today are the 4 triggers that bring on that urgent, buzzy, more energy with food. And we're going to talk about what's happening under the surface of those food choices that might feel elusive right now. And 99.9 of approaches miss, which is why we tend to be spinning our wheels for years. Essentially, we're working on the wrong problem. But after so many years, we think we're broken instead of our approach. And we'll get into, I think today, showing you what's really going on. We're going to talk about why our out of control eating makes so much sense. And that may feel like a big leap to make, but I hope today it'll start to click just even 10% more. One of the greatest compliments I get is people are like, this is common sense. And I'm like, yes. And common sense is not so common, especially in the health and wellness world these days, which has really gotten very crazy. We're going to talk about why traditional coaching tips and tools fall short when it comes to food habits specifically. And then we're going to go over the framework, which is Truce with Food Consistency, of how to close that knowing and doing gap. So I need a little bit more participation from all of you again. So these are 2 clients that came to consistency, and they were 2 different problems. One was a coach who knew more than those of us who, are just trying to be healthy. And then one was, a regular person. And the first one was like, look, I look forward to being by myself and rewarding myself with peanut M&Ms after a long day. Something I can look forward to regardless of how long bedtime takes or how often my daughters wake up, as opposed to say a bath or yoga. A few peanut and M&Ms is no big deal, but I often can't stop, right? And then this was a woman in her 40s. It affected sleep, right? Which then we know is just this downhill spiral. And then this was a health coach who came to consistency and says, I'm like a raccoon in my kitchen at night all alone. I know everything I should do. I'm a master level health coach, but I don't do any of it. So at the end, we're going to show you how we work through this based on everything we're going to learn. But I'm curious, what have you tried or been told to try based on what you think the solution would be here for these two people, right? Based on what you've internalized from reading, podcasts, what you've tried to try. I'm just curious, what the steps or the to-dos would be based on what you've learned in the past. So does anybody want to share that? And let me see, before I was able to see the chat. Oh, here we go. So if you've been struggling with food at night as a reward, or so much, but don't do any, what have you, call a friend, brush your teeth. Oh my God. I know, and my teeth routine now takes like 20 minutes. I dread it because I got to water pick and clean the retainers, right? Yeah, a better bed routine, try a distraction, Kate. Yes, right? Yeah. Eating protein, fiber should help with hunger at night. Yeah, and I love that you said that, Ronnie, because I have to have a snack before bed to stay asleep. But yes, so sometimes the food stuff is helpful, but it's not the whole picture. Oh, lock your fridge at night. Great, that's great. Yeah, that reminds me of when Essa was little. We had these like things that were invisible, so he couldn't open all the doors and hurt himself, right, with like knives and stuff. And then we couldn't figure out how to open the door, and he showed us how to do it. I was like, okay, but yeah, so these are all kind of, I drink a turmeric tea in the evening that I love, Janet says. Yeah, this gives me something to look forward to instead of wine. It helps me sleep better. Yes, that's great that you found something that's really grounding and rooting. So all of what we're told to do, forgive yourself and move on. Oh, Val, I love you said that. I love that you said that, because we're going to get into constructive self-compassion today, because often if we want to be changing our eating habits, we do have to have compassion, but it's hard to move on when we feel like we can't trust ourselves and we're not following through on what we want to be doing. So it almost puts us at two different emotional goals. And then we blame ourselves if we can't forgive ourselves. So what we're focusing on here really is the issue is the food and distracting from it, or being super forgiving, which is important, and it's not enough, right? So all of these things can work for a little bit, but we're going to get in today to what happens when you actually resolve things at the root. So what's going on underneath those two situations in your own is really not about the food noise up top, and it's really not about the choices. Those behaviors and that food noise, which we'll get into as sort of this alarm in your system, is really because 4 of these triggers, 1 or all 4 of them, anywhere in between, are active. So what's at the tail eating that creates emotional patterns that, if you lock your fridge, you would still find a way to open it, right? Or you might be distracted for a little bit, but the next night, these tail triggers aren't going away because you were distracted, or simply forgiving ourselves isn't enough, because these tail triggers, as we'll get to, have needs. And until those needs are met, they're going to it's like playing whack-a-mole, and it requires a lot of energy. So so tired, I'm going to go into more detail in a minute, anxious, inadequate, and lonely. And the key here that we got to start with is the focus is on self-awareness, not food self-monitoring. And people think, and again, my clients come to me and they are more self-aware than the average person, which is great. And a lot of this self-awareness is actually self-monitoring. What is someone else going to think? What does it look like if I get the salad here? Does it look like I'm trying and failing? Or with my healthy friends, I have to be healthy, and my family who doesn't eat healthy, I have to eat like them, right? It's this external focus instead of internal awareness. So a couple examples of self-monitoring, right? You're probably doing it right now, right? When we don't know if we are emotionally safe, we tend to scan and see, how do I know if I can be me, I can share, I can disclose, right? A big one that my clients come to with that's more self-monitoring is this, this will land for everyone else but me, okay? And the self-awareness that we need to develop is like, oh, and we do this when we feel unsafe, we create sides, me versus them, us versus them. When I make myself the outcast, I discovered I'm actually making myself the outcast because I have a loneliness trigger. And this is how my psychology tries to protect me. If I'm an outcast, I know what I can and cannot do. I know how to fit in or fit out comfortably. To feel safe, I'm always looking for how I'm different, for better or worse. And we call this the inferior and superior. So a lot of my clients are like, I feel superior because I know so much. I know what everyone should be doing, but I feel inferior because I'm not doing it, right? So this is a clue that I need to be curious about what and who I can connect to reduce that loneliness trigger. So of course, we're never going to have everything in common. We're never going to agree with everything. And to start to reduce that trigger, it's like, oh, who can I connect to? What does land for me? And especially in our culture, which is very patriarchal, we are taught to compete with other women. So we compare our bodies to them. And, oh, how much are they struggling? Am I better? Am I worse? Women especially, we are conditioned to make ourselves very much separate from other women. And we do that a lot when we compare and contrast our bodies, our food choices. So here's another one that someone who came to consistency was with. On the surface, I'm down almost 50 pounds, but now that I am within about 5 pounds where I would like to be, my old nemesis sabotage is rearing its ugly head. So that is the what we'll get into, kind of the safety alarm. But that's the self-monitoring. Oh my God, how am I going to keep this up, right? But the self-awareness is this sabotage is actually self-protection. It makes so much sense because I'm anxious, right? There's that anxious trigger about keeping the weight off because I never have before long-term, and it's been quite hard to even lose the weight. So this is more what's coming up for me because of this scenario versus the scenario itself. So another one, when I overeat, I'm miserable, and yet it seems to continue all day or through the weekend with sugar and sweets. I can't stop because tomorrow I'm going to be better, right? So that's the self-monitoring. What is wrong with me? I'm not enough. Nothing seems to work. I'm the worst, and I'm miserable. And the self-awarenesses, I discovered I binge when I feel inadequate. This alone feels huge. This is taken from a past consistency client who ended her binging, satisfying her inadequate needs. And then the overeating makes me feel more inadequate. So these triggers are coming out in how we eat, but it's also, there's emotional root causes that have nothing to do with the food. That overly full feeling triggers so much miserable self-judgment because imperfection makes me fear I'll never get the results I want, both with food and in life. Saying tomorrow will be better supports me in the moment to believe there will be perfect conditions where I can excel. So this woman basically realized, oh my God, overeating was the safety button out of a lot of complexity that I didn't want to deal with, right? I was just hoping there would be perfect conditions one day. So that's what we're working on here with these triggers. And we're going to do a quick exercise to help you start to practice the internal, what is this bringing up for me? So our first trigger is tired, okay? And often we know we're struggling with the tired trigger if we use sugar and caffeine to power through. Or one consistency client said, it's like my props for the day that bolster me to do all I have to do. I deserve this eating at the end of the night is often from the tired trigger. Or people were saying this a couple years ago. I don't keep up with what's popular very much, but it was like Netflix and chill, right? Coming home after a long day, having no energy, and the relaxation is eating and zoning out on the couch. So what makes us tired? What causes the tired trigger? We have a preoccupation with food, okay? So when we get, should I eat? What shouldn't I eat? Oh my God, am I gonna last through the day? That is exhausting. When we are eating out of alignment with our body's needs, it just hits very differently after 35, even more after 40, a lot during the perimenopause transition. And then like, if you're like me in postmenopause, it definitely, settles down, but you have less room for error because you've lost those hormonal supports. So that leads us to perimenopause and menopause realities, right? I've had struggled with insomnia for 4 years and finally worked through it, but insomnia is much more common. We have less stress buffer for existing life. And we're in these like peak demand eras. I was over helping my parents yesterday. My dad has a chronic disease and trying to help there. And then, you've got kids and there's just a lot of caretaking and yet you need more recovery when you have more demands. And recovery is even more important. But if we don't get that, we end up more tired. And then this is a big one that a lot of consistency clients discover. It's not just about sleep and how food is burning us out, but it's a lack of agency. So not enough of what lights you up on your metaphorical plate, right? It's more have tos, shoulds, musts than I get to do this. Wow. Or, oh, I'm looking forward to this. So that's what causes the tired trigger. The anxious trigger, okay? So this is uncertainty from the outside. This can come from changing physiology, our bodies going through perimenopause and menopause, and then just aging in general, our physiology is changing. And so that means, not recovering as faster. That means, less satiety from our foods. There's just a lot going on. Then there's unpredictability. I was listening to a podcast with this woman who studies change, and she said people are going to look back at this time period and think it was like, generation transition. We are going through more change than has ever, at a faster rate that has ever been happening in the human history, right? So there's a lot of unpredictability globally, politically, but also in our own lives. And then often, clients will say, I'm standing in front of the fridge at the end of the night and I don't even know how I got there or why I'm there. And there's just this jumble of feelings. I couldn't even tell you what I'm feeling. So and anxiousness comes uncertainty from the outside. How did your eating and health go during COVID, during perimenopause, during menopause times of rapid change that disrupt your routine? That will tell you how versed you are in handling the uncertainty trigger. Transitions. So on a smaller scale, we have our day-to-day transitions. Waking up and going into the morning to work. For a lot of clients that work to home, transition is really hard. And then after dinner into sleep. Or starting a new project. A lot of clients procrastinate eating because of how they're building up a task. So transitions can cause that eating. Perimenopause and menopause, profound changes, and I say body included, because this doesn't get talked about enough. We are now talking a lot about hormone changes and lifting and protein, and that's all great. And yet underneath it is a profound developmental opportunity to really do the second half of our life more on our terms. And you have to, because of the hormones that you've lost, you got to be a lot more discerning, a lot more ruthless with what gets your yes, what gets your no. And we don't really have a lot of cultural support around that. And so people may take HRT, they may lift, they may do all the things, but if they haven't changed the fundamental way that they relate to their needs, that stuff can't land as well. And so that's really what we focus on here. And then, sometimes people will say, I'm doom scrolling. How do I just get through this? A lot of times we're making choices to reduce anxiety rather than how we really want to do that. So this is often what causes the anxious trigger. Then we had the inadequate trigger. And this is where the self-doubt, the uncertainty is coming from the inside. We can think I'm not enough if our weight and worth are really entangled and we're struggling with our weight. That is a big sense of inadequacy. If you feel high maintenance with your food and health needs, if you're waiting on perfect conditions because that's the only time you feel you can excel, or you think you're broken instead of your approach, right, around food, I'll go right to the perimenopause and menopause changes. A lot of clients will think, I'm still struggling because I'm now lifting 3 times a week. I'm eating enough protein. I've got my fiber, like Rodney said, and yet I'm exhausted. I don't feel as good as I think, and it must be me rather than what is this deeper pace and this deeper emotional patterns that are still rearing their ugly head and that we can't ignore anymore. Maybe we could ignore in our 20s and 30s because we didn't feel them as much. And then also we're going through a period now where we think everything happens instantly, rapidly, and we think changes should happen instantly, and they just take longer when we age. Thin is in again, which can trigger old food stuff we thought we left behind. We can feel inadequate with the food battle, right? Why is it so hard for me? I caved again and feel so broken. How am I back in the same place? This trigger again gets built up with traditional approaches because they're not getting to these triggers and the needs. If we really struggle with perfectionism, we can often be like, chuck it, F it, I'm eating, right, with food and exercise, but also working, aging, parenting, being a concerned citizen. If you're worried about being a good mom, right, or a good worker or a good daughter, right, that is code for perfectionism, right? There is this fantasy ideal way to be, and then everything will work out. And that's, we can intellectually know that's not how life works out. And yet emotionally, it can feel really risky to be in that messy middle for people. And then often if you're doing procrastinating eating, it's often because we don't feel enough and we're building up again what we have to do to run away from this inadequate trigger. And then lastly, we have the lonely trigger. And this can come from, I don't feel at home in my body. I had a truce with food for many years, and a truce with my body. And then I happened to go through postpartum and menopause at the same time. And I had plantar fasciitis, my body hurt, insomnia, and I had gained 30 pounds. And thank God I had separated my weight from my worth, but I didn't feel at home in my body, and really nothing had changed. And it just felt so foreign. I was like, I thought I figured this out. What? And it was a huge learning curve to what does it mean to go through menopause and shift everything. Secret eating is often a sign we feel alone. Our food patterns, it can feel a little abstract to say this right now, but you start to see it the more you do this work. If we feel alone and then we're eating alone, our food patterns are just revealing how we feel emotionally in our life, or finding ways to be alone to eat. One client who joined Consistency, halfway through the program, she was like, oh my God, I just was always excited to get away from my family and eat by myself. But I never registered that as eating alone. But as I've gone through this framework, I'm realizing how distant I do feel from her own family. So we may not be conscious of it, but the food patterns reveal a lot. So what causes this lonely trigger? Feeling superior and inferior at the same time, right? A lot of my clients have done a lot of personal growth, and food is still a struggle for a lot of you, right? That knowing and doing gap is still present. Logically, we get something deeper is happening, but what is that direct path? Rather than feeling like esoterically feeling my feelings, like what does that even mean? Or some clients will say like the mean girl brain keeps them spiraling. And again, we get more into the program how this is a protection, so that you kind of get into shape, but that's a sign that we're feeling usually really lonely. Perimenopause and menopause changes. We can feel separate from the body we once knew, perhaps what used to be really fulfilling. I had to get my health and weight back into shape. I had to work on my overworking pattern. I just could not overwork like I used to. And so we have a real midlife value shift that our life often doesn't feel like it fits, not because we're doing anything wrong, but this is what life is asking of us in midlife again. And old issues are kind of resurfacing, saying you can't ignore me again. One of the things that a lot of people don't know is that past eating habits, disordered eating disorders actually spike in midlife with women. And the media will say we're clinging on to our youth because women are valued for their beauty and youth, and that's part of it. But also it's because of these emotional patterns that we haven't addressed, right? For me, I had to address a lot of emotional patterns around my body and my and weight and all this stuff in my 20s, but in my 40s, I had to address my overworking, which is what so much of my self-worth was built on. It was harder to unhook from because, binging on food wasn't really rewarding, but overworking and accomplishing was very rewarding. So it took me a hot minute to work through that, but I used this framework, thank God. And hormonally, what people don't talk about is this perimenopause period, and menopause is very similar to the week before our period, and also postpartum. And that is that hormonal shifts makes us more discerning. It makes us a little bit more ruthless. And again, so but this can still make us feel lonely and separated from what we once really cared about. And then we can feel separate for reasons beyond food and weight. Many of my clients feel like the black sheep, the outsider in their families, in their social circles, at work. And so that tends to be a pattern that has built up over the years. And again, if we have a lot of shame around our eating habits, that just makes us feel more and more separate, more and more broken. So what we're going to do is just a quick 5 minutes. And again, you may get clarity after the call. Hopefully you'll get a little bit of insight now, but clarity takes some time. But we're going to start to take you, I want you to go through a day that had some challenging eating. It could be today, it could have been yesterday, it could have been the weekend, right? And what we want to start now that we have this different lens of self-awareness, right? And again, this is just step one. But what we want to do is think about what were the triggers in the day? What were the situations? What was underneath that? And what was that bringing up for me versus the food focus? So I'll give you an example. This was a consistency client named Adrian. And when she did this exercise, right, her first thing in the morning was waking up and she was exhausted from overeating at night and thinking, nothing in my wardrobe is going to fit. What am I going to wear? Am I going to be on the skinny end, the fat end? These were her words, right? And so she was just like, I'm just exhausted by all of this. So she's already triggered, right, during the day and coming at like, I think of it like a battery, right? Like her battery is already waning. When she gets through, she's like, I eat healthy, I get the kids out the door, whatever. And then she goes to work and she gets an email. And emails, you don't know the tone, there's so much missing nonverbal communication, but she reads it as she did something wrong. And then the food noise starts. Oh my God. She's like, that's when I went into the kitchen break room. I made sure anybody else was around, but someone had brought in bagels and I wasn't hungry, but underneath, I just kept spiraling about this email and how I had to defend myself, but then also what did I do wrong? Did I not know this? And that's when what really brought up her food noise was feeling inadequate in that moment from this email. So then she goes to pick up her kids at that work to home transition, and her one kid is struggling again. He had some behavioral issues, and she had a whole support team, but it was just like, ugh, this again. I don't know how to fix this, right? Like, I just don't know what we're going to do. And then she starts thinking, oh my God, I can't wait to get home with some cheese and crackers, right? Mm-hmm. And so she was able to start to connect, oh, it's really not about the cheese and crackers. It's the uncertainty of how hard this situation is. And then it's the end of the day and she's trying to think, oh, don't eat before bed because that's going to disturb your sleep, right? And then instead of, right, we get this distraction advice. It's like, oh, now I see I am exhausted because I still don't know what's going to happen with that email. I still am reeling from that email. I still don't know what next steps are with my kid. And I'm just tired of this food battle, right? So yeah, maybe she distracts herself for a day, but these are still underlying triggers that are going to keep coming up. So now I want you to try it. But before we do that, I just want to see if anyone has any questions about the exercise or the tail triggers so that you can, effectively do this 5-minute reflection. Does anybody have any questions? Seeing if anyone. Welcome, Lindsay, Kate, Joanne, Carrie. No questions? You can do old school analog too and just unmute yourself because I don't often see people. I only can see 4 people on my screen. So, makes sense. Yay, Kate. Good. Yeah. And we're going to go through why turning to food makes sense. So let's do the exercise. And again, just go through a day that was hard. And I'm going to give everybody 5 minutes and just reflect and see what was the deeper emotional trigger underneath all the noise and the experience.
Do we write it down on our paper?
Yeah.
Okay.
You could I think writing is really helpful. So you can just draw a line and then think about when did food noise come up, or it could be food noise in and of itself. Meaning like, oh, like I want to go to the break room, or I don't know if people work from home, or I'm going to go to the kitchen, right? So think of even just the food noise itself, or when you're actually making the food choices, and then think about what was that situation bringing up for me. And it might be a couple of triggers. That's a-okay too.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yeah, yeah, great question. Do about one more minute. Okay. Now, again, it may be that you're like, um, clarity takes some space. So for the next couple of days, you can start to use this. What's at the tail end? Like first, when you're getting food noise, when you're not hungry, when it doesn't make sense, you'll be able to ask yourself first, wait, why does this make sense? Then what's at the tail? What's at the tail end of this? And you will start to see these triggers so much more often. But for right now, what did you come up with your biggest trigger? And again, you may have several, but I'm curious what seems to be the most prominent one for everybody.
Do you want us to write it or share it or?
Oh yeah, could you share in the chat? Yeah, good. Ronnie, I'm gonna have you co-facilitate with me.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. If you guys can share in the chat, that would be great. Inadequate. Yeah. Tired and anxious, lonely, anxious and inadequate. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that self-monitoring, which again we can talk more about afterwards, is so exhausting. It makes us so anxious, inadequate, anxious. Yeah. And again, we're living in really uncertain times. And so I hope everyone can have this is where the compassion comes in of like, oh my God, we're all holding a lot, a
Mhm.
lot. I don't know anyone who's not going through big transitions or one is on the right. Yeah, Kate, lonely with a dose of anxious. Yeah, yeah. And that lonely is so hard, especially because then a lot of my clients then turn to food. They're like, I retreat inward into my own world, which then exasperates that. Wonderful. Thank you, everybody, for sharing. So, yeah, a lot of inadequate and lonely, which I think really tracks, and anxious, which tracks with the time. And one thing I will say too, again, a lot of consistency is about having the space to reflect over time. And clients start to realize as they do this more, like I remember one client was like, I didn't realize how much inadequacy was affecting me. She was like, I don't wake up every day thinking I'm not enough, but certain times to raise her voice. And she was a leader leading a team. And she's like, I doubt myself in certain ways. And there's healthy self-doubt, but like the spiraling. And what I say to participants, like halfway through the program, I'm like, isn't it amazing you're not eating more? Like you go from beating yourself up to the more you see these triggers, the more you're like, wow, like I'm actually not eating as much as I could be given how often these triggers are present. And I will say the lonely trigger is just so challenging because it takes such risk to come out of that. But Kristen, who is our small group coach, and I'm going to introduce her here in about 10 minutes when we get more into the program. I think she can share a little bit about the shame and loneliness trigger and how she worked through that. So before we get there, before we get to meet Kristen and more, it's like, okay, what's going on? What do these tail triggers in of themselves activate? So why does turning to food? Why do we not work out, right? When when we're feeling this way? I mean, that's what the work is, to be able to support ourselves that way. Or why do we not eat lettuce, right? Although everyone picks lettuce as like the healthy food. Why do we go to maybe the more destructive things? And this is really the missing piece. So I'm just going to go over, this is an in-depth model. We go into it a lot more in my programs, but I just want to give you this language because it helps. So all of us have three selves. Well, I shouldn't say all of us. But about 80 to 85% of us have experienced some sort of trauma. So trauma's a lot more common than we think. And I think of this model in my certification, we just call this being human. This is really just a model of being human. So we don't need to get all academic about it. Like, let's be practical. But we all have a healthy self. We have a survivor self. And the survivor self's job is to protect the trauma self. Okay. So, for example, I used to binge on sugar during my scans from having cancer. And that binging on sugar was my survivor self protecting myself from opening up Pandora's box around my cancer trauma that I had not processed because I thought I had just moved on. Okay. So the survivor self is who we're really dealing with these tail triggers, but we'll get to it. So the healthy self wants to take risks and grow and change. It brought you here. It's the one that said, I don't know about this Allie woman. Or maybe you listen to the podcast and you're like, oh, I'm in, right? I know some of you have already signed up. I'm excited, but regardless of where you are, this healthy self is the one that's curious. It's open, right? It's the one that guided you to do all the work it took to arrive here. Like I said, a lot of my clients have been in therapy. A lot of them are sober. They've done a ton of stuff, or body positivity, to get here. Like, let's not diminish how hard it is just to get to this stage 2 place in the assessment that I have. Okay. And the good news is that this healthy self is always present. So the challenging news and the real work is that we have this survivor self, okay? And you will meet the survivor self, not usually in the beginning of change, but after the novelty of it wears off, when you're actually going to have to make real lifestyle changes of underneath it all. I hate when people say you have to put yourself first. Well, yes. And sometimes it's not about first or second. It's about how can everyone's needs get met. But we live in a very binary culture world. But anyways, the survivor self is activated by the tail triggers, okay? It is its entire job is to stress, okay? It's to catastrophize to prevent the worst from happening. So I'll give you an example of how this operates unconsciously. So I was bullied really badly in fifth grade. It's actually when I started emotional eating. And about now it was 2015, 11 years ago, I found myself really burnt out in my business. And I found myself really isolated. So I understand this lonely trigger well. And what I didn't realize was my survivor self had me judging, for better and for worse, all the women in my field. And it was judging them because I had been bullied before and didn't trust groups of women. So the catastrophe came out as judging, right? Oh, who's like really flaky, or who's academic and I could never approach, right? It had all these judgments, none of the men in my field, right? It was just the women because, hashtag patriarchy. But I found myself so alone and isolated because of this survivor self, okay? And so this survivor self, it doesn't always come out as, oh my God, I'm trying to help you survive. It comes out as, I can't do that. You can't do that. They shouldn't be doing that, right? It's very much trying to keep us safe from past trauma. And I would say the bullying experience was a small t. It was when you're at that age, having the acceptance of your peers is so developmentally important. So when people say, don't care what other people think, like it's still important, just in a different way. So whenever we find ourselves hyper vigilant or spiraling or somehow isolating ourselves, loneliness again is this huge trigger. It's because our survivor self is doing its job. So until we're conscious of this survivor self, we just think this is just how it is. This is reality, right? I have to judge people and find my place, right? We're talking about belonging here. Now, the important thing here is the survivor self isn't coachable or able to change. We don't actually, you want a healthy level of discernment. This is not about the world is safe. Everybody's wonderful. No, no. The survivor self has real street cred. I don't want you to lose. The problem is it's overly rigid. And so it's all or nothing instead of discerning. And this survivor self is not going to change from more information, from reading more nutrition books, listening to more podcasts, or most coaching. So if you've ever done a coaching, coached with someone and you're like, I'm going to do it all. And maybe while you were working with them, it happened, or after a couple of sessions, it's like that survivor self came out and said, here's why this is unsafe to actually change. And so why does a survivor self use food? Okay. It is a top survivor self strategy. And this comes from Dr. Deborah McNamara, who is a child developmental psychologist. I had her on my podcast, and she said this quote that just hits people and makes the food make even more sense. She says, nothing is addictive as something that almost works. Food soothes, but doesn't satiate our deeper belonging needs. So what she's saying right there, I just get chills, is that survivor self needs to be cared for. Okay, so food almost works to make us feel comforted and cared for, and we judge ourselves for needing comfort, but that's part of that survivor self that doesn't want to risk vulnerability and having needs. But food almost works because it stimulates attachment chemicals. So attachment is the drive to belong. Belonging is feeling like we matter. So food stimulates oxytocin, serotonin, and dopamine, right? And the more sugar we eat, the more alcohol, the more intense hit of these chemicals we are getting. So food almost soothes the survivor self's fears and needs, right? So if we look at my scanxiety example, and that's an extreme example, but I'm just showing you if it can work for that, it can work for things that aren't so extreme. Binging on sugar from the time I booked my scans to the time I met with my oncologist to say, hey, they're clear, that was helping me manage all the uncertainty, all the loneliness. Like I feel teary even. I'm always surprised when I'm going to feel emotions. And the job was not to feel that way, but it was to get support for that, right? So what actually stopped me from doing that was when my parents would call and say, how are you doing? Rather than saying, oh, this cancer was already enough of a burden on our family. It was, I'm really scared. I know I'm 10 years out, but I'm still worried about this. It was my sister and husband, I lived in, who he was my boyfriend at the time, lived in Philadelphia. Will you come to these scans with me? I know it's a pain in the ass. I know you don't want to spend an hour and a half getting an MRI with me. Will you come to the appointment with me? So what I was doing was not trying to talk the survivor self out of its fear. I was accessing my healthy adult self and learning how to grow that so I could be supported through it. But that involved taking risks of feeling like a burden, feeling like I should be over this, all of this chitter chatter that the survivor self says so that I don't have to ask for help and have needs. Because when we are in a certain stage of our survivor self, we are focused on not looking bad to others. And this is where that self-monitoring is makes sense too. Or we don't want to look not good. So food helps us almost get the comfort and support we need, but it doesn't satiate the deeper needs associated with the tail triggers, right? So for me, it was really the uncertainty, and the uncertainty trigger needs to feel resourced. For me, sharing with people how I actually felt and getting support, that's what stopped the sugar, not a better plan, not distraction. It was actually having support for that, the real fears of the survivor self. So in the beginning, I talked about, we have all these different words for nighttime eating, alone eating, secret eating, healthy eating too much. But what is all pointing back to is this feeling of safety, specifically belonging, like we matter. The degree of the triggers will determine the intensity and force of our destructive eating patterns, okay? So if you're just casually eating pretzels as a snack that you don't want to be doing, that may be a different intensity of trigger versus I had one client who joined consistency, and she came because she said, now food and overworking aren't working for me anymore. She said, and I know I'm exhausted from overworking and overfunctioning, right? So she was having very different intense amount of food eating at night. She could not eat at night than someone who is just, I'm a little tired at 3 p.m. Okay. So each of these triggers create this alarm that our primal needs are not going to get met. And we all have needs. That's part of being human. It's part of the deal. And when we worry that these needs won't get met, we feel really alone, consciously or unconsciously. Okay. So when we're binging, that's the extreme end of the intensity of eating. Binging is when our tail triggers are the most intense. Okay, so my client who stopped binging by working on her inadequate trigger, it was in her business, it was with her health, it was with her weight, it was in her family, it was in her relationship. So that inadequacy trigger was framing how she felt about 7 important things in her life, right? Where she needed to be, feeling supported, she was actually cutting herself off from that. So that's why the binging was so intense versus, eating pretzels at 3 p.m. I don't even think that's maybe a big deal, right? Everyone's different, but that's a very different intensity than, I just got this annoying email from my sister and I need to, I always feel less than her, right? But I can handle that maybe. So I hope that makes sense. When we're grazing, when we're not hungry, not making healthy choices, casual overeating, that tends to be the least intense of the tail triggers. So all of this is one root cause, and it's just a matter of how many and what intensity of those triggers. And if we feel that aloneness, that often means shame is tied to that. And shame is the most intense. And somebody was saying, I feel frozen to fix. When we are in shame, our nervous system goes into freeze. And so we blame ourselves for not being able to fix, but we actually have a physiological break on changing. And we work to support that in consistency. So much of our physiology determines if we can change. So for example, part of why I love doing group work is when you show up, even if you have your camera off, you're not participating, you start to realize that there's other people like that are working on the same problem. And oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin are produced. And so what we call motivation is often just having those chemicals of support. So often, again, when we try to go at something alone, we are missing the very chemicals that happen when we get support on a physiologic level. So your eating is a second half of life invitation to stop trying to self-monitor to look good to others. And we get more into this in the program, but self-monitoring, we all do it the first couple decades of our life. When we are young, we do not have the ability to take care of ourselves. We need to care about what other people think and make sure we are pleasing to them. So a lot of the stuff that we blame ourselves for is actually a survival mechanism. Now, that is the basic idea around that version of belonging and safety of self-monitoring is where we start. We don't have to stay there. The second half of life invitation is to have self-awareness of what feels good in your body and life. So essentially to realize having needs does not disconnect you from others. It will actually bring you closer to the people, places, and experiences that are the most fulfilling for you. Doesn't mean it's all puppies and rainbows, but you can rest and feel good in your choices. And that is what our food is really inviting us into. So this is what we do in Truce with Food Consistency is go through this. We can call it a blueprint, but it's a framework. It has the structure to make sure that you're going to get the results you want, but it has the flexibility to meet you with your individual life. Somebody can have the same tired trigger, the same inadequate trigger, but they have different situations. They have different capacities. They have different complexity. Still need to get the same needs met, but it's going to be a different process. And so what we do in Truce with Food Consistency is really view your food as a portal to your deeper hunger, to the deeper needs underneath. And I'm going to take you through those two cases from the beginning. I'm going to show you how we would apply them into Truce with Food Consistency. So the first lesson we do is we plan a retirement party for food. So we did this in 5 minutes today to connect some of these tail triggers. But like I said, the more time you have and the more you practice not judging yourself, but wondering why it makes sense that you're eating this way, the more you have more clarity, more space. This work requires space, which is why we work together over 3 months and the Thanksgiving holiday, because that brings up a lot. So you will start to see more of these tail triggers and really start to see, oh, I knew before it was something deeper, and now I really get it. I can't ignore this. And then in lesson 2, we're going to say, what job have you enlisted food to do? So we will, for each tail trigger, and I'll go through some of them when we go through those case studies next, there's different needs. And until those needs get met, the food is still going to be the issue. So I'll give you a nourishment menu, and we start practicing in really safe situations. We call these 7-inch wave situations. They're 7-inch, 7-foot, 70-foot. 70-foot is family of origin. It is huge life transitions that you're going through. We don't start there because our healthy adult self is not in shape enough to manage that complexity. We start in the easy situations so that your system can start to realize, it's safe to have needs. It's actually super, super safe. And it's actually really fun. And then 7-foot is, this feels a little risky. And that's where the group and my support really comes in. But we start in the second lesson with just these smaller situations. And it can be as small as, I wake up and I'm feeling really tired and I'm going to go for a walk instead of pushing myself to do the HIIT training I thought that I needed to do. What happens when I do that? That can feel really anxiousness for people, right? Oh my God, because I'm still measuring, like, am I going to reach my weight or health goals? But we start slow and small. That's an example. So in lesson 3, and this is why I especially wanted Kristen to join, because she will be teaching this. I'll be there. But we're going to talk about connecting the dots, how to manage your feelings about having needs. So most of my clients begrudge that they have needs, that they're humans, that their bodies take time. And they take more time as we age. Or that this involves other people. And so this is a nervous system lesson. A lot of times in traditional eating, when I was struggling with emotional eating, 20 something years ago, it was like, you got to feel your feelings. But the way most of us think we have to feel our feelings is just to sit there. And often that will put us more into freeze. That will create more frozen to fix, more inertia. So we really get into how do you support your nervous system so you can, which is essentially your survivor self, so that your healthy adult self knows how to care and doesn't get taken out by your feelings. Sitting with them is probably one of the worst things. And then in lesson 4, we get into the 3 self-protection stumbling blocks to change. So like I said, on the surface, we are not thinking, oh, this is my survivor self. Oh, this is my healthy self. We're thinking, I'm so behind. or we feel we build things up, or we worry about disappointing people, or we feel guilt. So we'll get to the three strategies underneath that create all or nothing thinking, that create either or. Oh, if I think of myself, someone else loses, right? I'm taking away from my family. If I spend time on my health, I'm taking time away from work. We have a lot of this black and white, all or nothing, either or thinking. And again, that we are not all or nothing people. That is a developmental stage that we can grow out of. And then in lesson 5, we are going to integrate everything. So at this point, you don't need more information. You just need practice, practice, practice. And we're practicing all along. But this lesson 4 to 5 will be over Thanksgiving. So we will start with, hey, part of a big teaching of this to get to become more self-aware versus self-monitoring is we start thinking, what do I want to get out of something? What do I want to get out of Thanksgiving? Rather than just kind of going with the flow. I always say one of my favorite quotes is a Swedish proverb that says, only dead fish go with the flow. I love it. But anyways, so we will say, okay, rather, it doesn't mean we have to give up our Thanksgiving traditions. It doesn't mean we don't have to travel. There's none of this rigidity. It's like, what do I want to get out of Thanksgiving based on everything I've learned about myself over the past 2 months? And then we'll identify your needs. We'll figure out how you're going to get those met. And so it's not about the food. It's not about should you eat the pie? Should you balance your blood sugar, all that stuff. But it's like, how am I going to make this holiday more on my terms? And then we'll experiment and then we'll see what we learned. Because really succeeding here is about showing up with the C plus effort and trying and being willing to learn and be surprised. So let's take those 2 cases from beginning. So I can take you through kind of some real examples of what this looks like. So this is the person who came into consistency, really rewarding themselves with food, right? And the distractions, I love that someone named it as distractions, right? A bath, brushing your teeth. Oh God, that's so unfulfilling. Would work. But here's what she discovered. Okay, so I actually, and she didn't see this in the initial workshop, but after doing this exercise for longer, it was like, oh, I'm actually really tired. And I'm starting to realize that everything on my list is have tos. So including, gotta eat so much protein. I gotta get out in my morning sunlight. I have to do HIIT, right? All the things that were quote unquote she should be doing, but they were not always super fun. And there's fun ways to get in what we have to do. But she was just like, I don't have time. And then she's like, go, go, go. I don't even have 15 minutes to myself because she worked outside the home. She had 2 kids, right? And so she started to really realize like, oh, so these peanut M&Ms and wanting this food at night, it's the only thing that I'm in choice about. It's the only thing that's mine. It's the only thing that I get to keep for myself. So we needed to find ways for that to happen outside of food. So her food's job, it was short-term energy, but it had a high interest rate and cost. It took more sleep away from her at night. She was doing caffeine in the afternoon, which made her tired but wired. But the need there is really agency and choice. And so she needed a better pacing of replenishment. I used to on the nourishment menu, I used to say that the need was rest, but so many of my clients were already thinking all or nothing in rest. They were thinking, oh, rest is like laying on the couch and eating, or I'm so tired, all I do is like read for 5 minutes before bed. That is not rest. We're thinking of things that actively replenish us. And so she started practicing with that. Of how do we do this in safe ways at first, and finding ways to be replenished within parenting, replenished with at work, rather than this is something separate to do. It's actually how I'm approaching these things. And so then in lesson 3, she really connected the dots that when she started to feel behind, that really made her feel a lot of shame, and that inertia came over. So the losing motivation wasn't really something that she could find through logic. It was, I need to figure out how to support myself when I am in this frozen to fix inertia place by supporting her nervous system in a different way. And then calming down or relaxing. That actually sent her further away from what she wanted. It made her more tired. So once she started learning how to have more of a charge when she was feeling this exhaustion and how that would actually replenish her, then she started to realize like, oh, I am really in this accommodating protection strategy. Accommodating is one of them. And I'm thinking it's my work or me, my kids or me. And so we started to really have to figure out where is the and? Where is it, hey, this benefits both of you? That's not going to happen all the time. And anyone who's a parent knows you can't always put yourself first. And if that's the default, then that's where we get into problems. Or with work, right? There was a lot of, she realized, internalized expectations of what she thought her boss, her team needed that weren't really warranted. But she didn't really know that until, again, this is the self-awareness, we started working on this lesson. And then in the last lesson, again, we start doing this in really from the second week on, but how do we grow that healthy adult self instead of that survivor self? So practice over Thanksgiving with having needs. And she had an amazing Thanksgiving. She's like, yes, I had pie, I had my family's, favorite foods, but one serving was enough. I wasn't the next day thinking like, oh, I'm traveling, the hell with it, I'll get back. It's like, oh, the holiday itself was replenishing. Doesn't mean it was without stress. This is not removing stress from our lives. This is not removing the tail triggers. It's how do we take better care of ourselves when those happen. Now, the more we employ our healthy adult self, we do prevent a lot of those tail triggers. We will prevent exhaustion. We will prevent a lot of inadequacy, a lot of loneliness, and they're still going to come up. So that's the work. So this client was the one that felt like a raccoon in her kitchen. It was like, okay, right? The distraction techniques, right, that she had learned as a master level health coach weren't really addressing the issue. For her, she realized she felt so lonely with her own family. And it made her feel like a horrible mom. She had so much shame around this. And so when we feel lonely, the need is significance. We need to feel like we matter. Our imperfect human selves that maybe need rest, that aren't at full capacity to parent the way we want, whatever it is. For her, it was parenting, right? So what she had to start doing is being attuned and feeling significant with what her family time was bringing up for her, right? Before she could share it with anyone else, she had to become aware. This is why I say this is so much more self-awareness. The self-monitoring was, I'm a bad mom, I'm a bad coach, what's going on? But the awareness was, being with my family, particularly a certain person in her family, was really challenging. And so she was having all these feelings around being a bad mother, and was conflating having bad feelings about parenting with being a bad mother. So that was a big shift for her. Oh, I can have hard feelings. That doesn't mean I'm a bad person. And so then her protection strategy was really avoid. So compete, avoid, and accommodate are our three protection strategies, and we go much more into details. But she's like, I'm avoiding my own feelings because I have this assumption around what it means to be a good and bad mother. And the good definition of a mother was like the PTA cupcake mom. And for her, that wasn't attractive. So no wonder she wasn't going to want to put work into being a good mom. So the work was really what feels good for how you want to mother, for who your kid is, for who you are, for what stage of life you're in, right? There's a lot more nuance and depth there than just you have to make cupcakes. Hey, I sometimes make cupcakes. That's fine. But so I'm not dissing cupcakes, but for her, that did not work, right? So, and then 5, her practicing. And again, we were doing this as we were going on, but how can I stay present with my family? How can I become closer with my kids by meeting them where they are instead of what is good mothering? And this was so freeing because she's like, oh my God, all these things that I thought were bad actually aren't that big of a deal. When we're in a void, we really build things up because we think there's a perfect fantasy solution where then, oh, there's safety. If I do this, I'm safe. Everything's going to work out. And she started to realize like, oh, it's a lot messier than that. And things can still work out with good enough. So I want to show you real clients, the results with this. And again, who comes into consistency. So this is not a quick fix, but it will give you the quickest route through this eating. So it's a quicker fix. It's not even an instant. I don't even like the word fix, but I want to share with you. So these are the type of people and these are the results they get. So Dr. Bugrin, she teaches other teachers self-care. She came to this wanting to lose weight, but really wanted something more in detail. And again, the program is 3 months, but 1 year out of the process, she has lost 20 pounds. And this was big for her because she travels like 9 months out of the year for her job. So it's in airports, it's more complexity than just plan your meals, right? And she was someone who was doing at the time, this was, I don't know, like a while ago, Weight Watchers with it. I don't know if she's still doing that or whatever, but it works really well in conjunction if you are doing some sort of other food plan. Ginny came in with a weight loss goal, but through the program, that was no longer her goal after that. For her, she really understood, it helped her break through the self-blame, inadequacy, and isolation that her inadequate trigger um, really created. So rather than thinking she's broken, what's her problem, her goal really became around feeling better in her own skin, which is amazing. And then this is Isis. She came into she was in this program used to be called Why Am I Eating This Now? And again, I share she had done a lot of therapy work. She had had two past eating disorders. She came in, had just lost her job, so was facing food insecurity because of finances. And it was so gentle and purposeful that she was able to do the work she also was on a podcast of mine, so this is all public knowledge, but was really pre-diabetic. And the doctor was like, you got to do something. And so this is kind of that forgive yourself and move on. When we get into midlife, we aren't bad people based on what we eat. And I know that takes a while to unhook from. And there are certain health problems that are going to be exacerbated if we aren't consistent enough. You don't have to be perfect, but that's what Isis was coming up against, right? She was like Lori. She had a real health concern and she needed to be more moderate than just forgive yourself and move on. And so she, it was like, oh my God, I love that this was practical, deep and practical, going out and implementing. But it's not like school, right? It's like, oh, this is my life. So it's not a lot of extra time. It's, what is this situation bringing up for me? Oh, okay. I have needs in this situation. This feels hard. Let me bring it back to the group if I want to, or, et cetera, et cetera. Or, you can share, not share, post on the groups, like share on the calls, post on the boards. It's up to you. We have all different levels of visibility because our survivor selves can often fear unsafe visibility. So who gets the most out of this? It's people who want to look inward and address the frustrating eating at its roots. So if you're doing all those things, you know what to do and you're not doing them, this is the missing piece. It's the survivor self, more logic, more reading, more learning. Doesn't mean that stuff is bad. It's just not going to change your survivor self. This is not about adding more to your plate. Right? It's about removing what's out of alignment. So this is very much a less is more. You don't need more routines. I love that Bree said that. Oh, get a better nighttime routine. No, this is about needs. And we focus on needs because needs offer flexibility. The loneliness trigger needs significance. We can find significance not by doing more. We can find significance in the life we're already living. We can find replenishment in the life we're already living. And so this isn't more to do. It's shifting how we show up in our life. Weight loss has become very controversial. I understand both sides, and you're welcome here regardless of your weight loss goals. A lot of people come and they don't have weight loss goals. A lot of people come and they do. It's just that most of the work is how to be consistent with our food. It doesn't mean we can't talk about weight loss because weight loss will bring up all these triggers, especially if you're under eating and feel shame about it. It can bring all of those up, but it's often like a side effect of the work. It's for reluctant to bad joiners who hate small talk. If you are skeptical, you are welcome. I don't want you to lose that. I just want to make a little bit more discernment and flexibility. And if you enjoy learning wisdom and humor, we laugh a lot. This program is not super heavy. It can bring up intense feelings, but we're still kind of thinking our feelings during this program. So it's not super like intense because again, we don't want to go super intense and super deep yet, because as we grow our capacity for our healthy adult self, what used to feel so overwhelming becomes manageable. Believe it or not, asking for that help back there with, when I was going through my scans, that felt like a huge risk at the time. And now it's like, I don't have any problem asking for help around my health, right? It's like, oh, it's just what I do. Now I have other edges, right? We never arrive, but we can arrive without turning to food. I mean, we can arrive with not turning to food, but part of this work is realizing we're always going to have hard feelings. How do we support ourselves through them? Because that survivor self, you don't want that survivor self to go away. It's there to keep you safe. Success is just showing up with a C plus effort. And if you can do that, you will be infinitely further than you are now. And I talked about this in one of my emails, is that a lot of people bring this idea of hard work to this, that it's going to be more white knuckling, more holding my breath, more restriction. When this actually, the real challenge is to believe that you can trust in satisfaction, not deprivation. And like Dr. Boot or Tina was doing, some other clients, it's a wonderful complement to what you're already doing, like a nutritional plan, or if you are using tools like GLP-1s. I'd probably say like 20, 25% of people often are doing GLPs in my group, and they find that the GLPs give them the space to do this emotional work. There are often people who are doing them at lower doses. So, your hunger isn't completely shut off. And also a lot of them want to go off of them eventually. So this can be great. But even if you want to stay on it forever, this is still going to help you with things. So now I'm going to introduce Kristen, but here are the deets. This is a very, again, people bring often a perfectionist assumption to this program, and I get it. It's hard to just drop that mindset, but this is a very flexible program. We meet every other week. There's an online community support. There's live call support. They're recorded. The expectation is not that you're going to do everything all of the time. Again, if you can do C plus 70% of calls, 70% of the lesson, you're going to be infinitely further than you are now. But I like this quote from Anna because it's the structure is intentionally designed. So you get 3 months of master coaching from me. Like I said, I've been doing this 19 years. It's my framework. I know it inside and out. Plus the medicine of the group of wise women who get it. And again, I'm going to go diagonal, but the belonging you will find in this group, even if you are suspect of it now, maybe a lot of you are ready for that. Either way, and again, you can be off camera. You don't have to share a lot. It will create I'm kind of a physiology geek. It will create the very chemicals that we associate with motivation and that we also that we also are turning to food for. And again, we are such a lonely culture. It makes sense that our eating is going up the lonelier we feel because, again, as Dr. Deborah McNamara says, food almost works, and nothing as addictive as something that almost works. But the group itself will create the motivation chemicals to keep showing up and help you make better choices, even if you never share. You will get 5 lessons and tools that are research-based and client-proven. We have that 24/7 online community where you'll be supported with and seen with a high caliber of women working through the issues. And then we have 7 live group coaching calls with me and 1 live group call with Kristen, who I want to introduce right now. And then Kristen is also going to be supporting you in 2 small group coaching calls. So once you join, you have a bunch of times to pick from, and you will get 2 small groups that you can attend during the program. So Kristen, I just wanted to introduce you and just share a little bit about how you arrived at this work and how because loneliness is also such a big trigger, maybe talking about you're the one who said to me, you had studied Brene Brown's work a lot, and she had gave us the language of shame, and you feel like this work is what helps us move through it. So I kind of led the witness, but that's just what I want you to touch on.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. So nice to be here with all of you. My name's Kristen. I'm a health coach. I am a yoga teacher. I am in somatic experiencing training. And so I'm so excited to teach lesson 3 and be here to support you with the work. So I found Allie many years ago, actually about 10 years ago, and I didn't end up working with her for, I guess, probably 5 years after that. I always listened to her podcast and knew she said things that made me feel seen, but was kind of stuck in that sacrifice and be rewarded, good girl culture. And I had all the issues with my body. I had overate, I underate, I overexercised, I binged. I had a very confusing relationship with alcohol. And at one point, I was kind of doing all the things that the experts were telling me. And I realized how bad I felt. What I needed to do was kind of figure out how to stop something, binging on the weekends, things like that. And so I took the leap, and it felt like a leap because things that Allie said today at that time wouldn't would have really triggered me. Like, this will make sense at some point, that I had needs, that, that I should be able to rest. I mean, I just, I just couldn't wrap my mind around that ever happening. And it's been some of the most beautiful work I've ever witnessed in Allie's group, ever done myself, because it is that belonging piece. And was such a bad joiner. And I really, stayed pretty quiet, but I just by listening to other people be open and have the courage to share what was really going on, and the epiphanies and the ahas of why this makes sense, it really does help so much. That lonely trigger. I mean, that was my biggest trigger, was the loneliness, because I didn't want to be a burden. I kind of was always overgiving, overcaring, and it led to burnout as a mom, as an employee. And these patterns that I was able to find with Allie's work were patterns that I was able to, over time, see. But this stuff is deeply embedded in the nervous system. This is how we learn to perform for years as young kids. And so it takes some time to kind of work through it. But the way, what I think it was Anna who had that quote of like the best structured program I've ever seen. I completely agree with that, because she titrates it in a way that it's not completely overwhelming, but it's these little ahas and these shifts that you hear that just make you start to see things that you would never have been able to see before, and connect dots that you probably couldn't have connected before. So yeah, I was really in my survivor self before I worked with Allie, and a lot of self-monitoring, and working with her helped me to really start to bloom and start to advocate for my own self, my needs, and then change completely my relationship with food, with how I parent, with how I show up in day-to-day life. So, I mean, if you're ready for some beautiful work, you're in the right space.
I love that you use the word titration is a word the nervous system uses, and it's to go slow and steady. And that's what, on the podcast, Jenny, when I was interviewing her, and she was like, I love doing this work. It was gentle and profound. It made me realize that, yeah, bye, Ronnie, that, again, so many people are bringing this like all or nothing, because again, that's kind of the developmental plateau that we're in when we join. Is like whatever we hear, we're still hearing it as extreme. But yeah, your survivor self, you can't change beyond a certain window of tolerance, and so a lot of people crash and burn and think it's their fault, instead of you actually really need to go slow and steady for change to last. So I'm glad that you brought that up. Yeah. Thanks, Kristen.
Yeah.
And I love that you said too, yeah, some people are like they're relieved by the C plus or to trust the process. And then other people it's super anxiety producing because it's like, no, I want the role. Like tell me.
Mhm.
So I know I remember someone last round was like, oh, so you're really not gonna tell us what to do. Like I heard it, but I didn't realize that you were really not gonna tell us what to do. And I'm like, yeah, because that just makes a survivor self-rebel. And then we all think we have an inner rebel, inner rebel instead of like, this is just not how we change. So thanks so much, Kristen.
Just 1 second. I'm sorry. I thought my computer wanted to reboot. That's why I thought I had to go. But right now it's not rebooting. So I'm here. It
Great.
did that to me the other day. I was on a Zoom call and it just bought me right out because it wanted to reboot. So anyway, thank you.
Yeah. No, I'm so glad you can still be here. So thank you, Kristen. Kristen is wonderful, and she will lead the nervous system call so that we can learn when we're having feelings or what we think of as stress, how to really support ourselves so it's productive. So there is an early bird special if you enroll by this Friday, August 21st. It is the so interesting and original code of early bird. So easy to remember. The investment is a one-time payment of $797 or a 2-month payment plan, $429 a month for 2 months. And again, if you do the early bird, it would be $697, or I think it's like $329 and then $429. I forget how my Carolyn, who's my assistant, divided that up. And I know some of you are here because of Diana, so this is her quote, but I got more out of this course than the $20,000 I invested in one-on-one health coaching. So I just want, it's super valuable if you are at that stage too and ready to do this work. And no judgment if you aren't, like this is not you know, this is not better or worse. It's just, especially if you're in stage one and still, thinking like, oh, there's a better plan out there, you may just be frustrated in this. But if you are in stage two and like, again, what everyone said today, knowing and doing, I'm frustrated by that. I suspect something deeper is going on. So, oh, and look what I did too. For the first time, I have links for everyone that I can put in the chat because I never think of that, but I'm learning as I go. So in the chat, I'm just going to put a link to the program. I'm going to put a link to check out. And then if you have just some questions, you can do a discovery call with me. I will, so there's some time slots there if you want to just chat about if it's the right next step. The dates, so we start September 8th after Labor Day. And then we will meet the next week on September 15th. And how the program works is then we meet every other week after that. And we will be done before the Christmas, Hanukkah, solstice, Kwanzaa, whatever you celebrate, we'll be done before it gets chaotic. What I do is you get so we will do the opening circle and then lesson one will open up. So lesson one is a lot deeper than we went today, but it's about the tail triggers, and you'll get a journal that helps you really start to connect your food noise and food choices to these triggers. Then we will meet, and then I will teach it again. I will take us through the same exercise now that you're much more primed for it. And then we'll just chat, like what questions, what are you struggling with? It'll be about the lesson. It'll be about your eating. And then lesson two will open up, which is the nourishment menu. And you'll learn, okay, what does resourcing mean? What does replenish mean? What does a compassionate witness mean when I'm feeling inadequate? What does loneliness need? And then you'll just experiment in small ways. And you have 2 full weeks. And then we come back and chat and I teach it again. And then Kristen will teach. And that's how we go. So there's a lot of flexibility built in. It's designed for people who have unpredictable schedules and just have a lot of competing commitments and responsibilities. And then we do a closing circle. And then again, once you join, Kristen has given us some small group times of different times that you can pick one of those and you will meet with her in a smaller group. And I think we'll probably have around 20, 25 people. So we may even have 15. I don't know. This is the first year I've ran this program twice in a year. So don't know what that looks like, but it's not a massive group. So you'll get even more individual group. I'm just sharing that because this isn't like a 200 person program. So now I want to ask some Q&A before I do the summary of today. Who still does anyone have questions? Normally we go ask questions as we go, but I just had a lot to cover. But does anybody have any questions on the material, the program, anything? The floor is yours. And please just unmute yourself. Because I can only see, maybe I can do gallery. Yeah, does anybody have any questions? Where's the participants here? I know it's a lot to digest. No questions. Wow. Or did I not see them in the chat? Someone wanted to do in the chat. Oh, thanks, Lindsay. Yeah. Okay. So we'll just do a brief summary if nobody has any questions. What's the number one thing you've learned from today's workshop? It's always helpful to just digest a little bit. You'll metabolize the next week or so, or what's the top thing you're puzzling through? This is a lot to digest in one day. But I wanted to bring in the survivor self because that language alone just really starts to bring in constructive compassion where we can understand why we're doing something. And clarity can take a minute. Like I said, you will probably have insights as the days goes on. So what's the number one thing you've learned or the top thing you're puzzling through? Oh, great presentation. Great, thanks. Yeah, I know we're running late, so I understand that I don't normally go this much over, but This was wonderful. Good. I'm glad. So it's landed. Good. Yeah. I'm all about the intellectual understanding. For me to feel safe, I need to understand it intellectually. Ah, Brie. Yeah. The details behind each trigger. Yeah. I saw a lot of myself in them. Yeah. Yeah. Like I say, once we do this work more consistently, we start to realize, like, wow, I'm doing really well considering how many of these triggers I have. Anybody else before we get to the summary? Yeah, Val. Maybe it really isn't about the food. Yeah. And again, if you can just be open to that, usually it takes like a good 6 weeks till people in their hearts are like, wow, this really isn't about it. Um, so yeah, it takes a minute. And that's what this work is. It's hard to really get it until you experience it because clients say everything's changed and nothing's changed. How I feel day to day, how I understand things, how I digest the world, right? How is so different, and yet I'm still in my life. It's just like Kristen said, I'm parenting differently, but I still have my kids. All those stuff. Yeah, and Barbara said trying to understand the three protection stumbling blocks. Yeah, that takes a minute too, because how we're viewing it right now is just how we think life is. But we get much more detail into that compete, avoid, and accommodate that creates, the compete makes us always think we're behind and we're not doing enough and we're not accomplishing much. And the avoid makes us build everything up, thinking there's a perfect solution. And yeah, and then the accommodate is we think we have to essentially people please, but we go much more into it. But that's what the survivor self throws up, and it throws up thoughts associated with each of those. So workshop recap. And again, thank you everyone for staying so long. I know we went about 15 minutes over. The tool that you can use, and it's not a typical tool like do this, don't do this, but the next time you're turning to food and you don't want to be, you can ask, why does this make sense? And you don't need to be perfect at this. The perfectionism in the building up is a hall of mirrors, so we tend to do it with everything, but you'll start to notice themes. Aim for doing
Valerie,
it. Yeah.
I just want to let you know that the screen's not on the PowerPoint slide. We're just seeing
Oh,
gallery.
oh, really? Thank you.
Yeah.
Wait.
Yes.
Oh my God. Okay, wait a second. Speaker.
Bree said she could see it, so maybe it's just me.
Yeah, can you see it?
Now
Okay.
I see it.
Okay. No, that's super helpful. Thank you, Bree. We usually have a resident millennial that helps me with the tech. Unearth what tail trigger is underneath your falling off track. Tired, anxious, inadequate, lonely. And I loved how Bree said, oh, seeing these more in detail, I see different flavors of them, right? So many food puns, flavors. But you will start to see one, and one will really stick out. The cool thing is that the framework works for all of them. But once you do one and work on that, you really have so much trust. Your healthy adult self is bigger. You're just in a completely different place. So you just repeat the process. These triggers signal alarm to your system that your survivor self is in the house. Baby, baby. I have to turn everything into a song. And food stimulates attachment chemicals, which temporarily soothes us, but does not satisfy these deeper emotional needs. So that's the work, is to understand that it is maybe not about the food, and that is enough to understand right now. And then work on getting our deeper needs met and have that, essentially learning how to take care of ourselves while we're struggling, because we're all nice to ourselves when we think we're getting an A+, but the work is to figure out how to take care of ourselves when we are being human. So any questions, you can email me at Ali@Ali Shapiro.